let me get us started. I'm Ray Fisk. I'm the third person listed here on the slide. My colleagues listed on the slide are Alison Joubert, Qusay Hamdan. They will each be sharing parts of the presentation. We put this together, the three of us, because our overall theme is tied to one of the problems, especially letting you two sit down for one, so I'm standing all the time. Our title is Redesigning the Service System of Spaceship Earth. And here's a visual way of portraying that with a picture of Earth from the moon. That idea of Spaceship Earth goes back to the very first pictures ever taken of Earth from the moon, 1968. Here's the problem, as we identified on the slide. Three key points we're making about the problem. That the systems of cruelty and dominance that actually exist in our world are exploiting the living systems of Earth. Now, those systems of cruelty and dominance are human-created systems. So that gets to these other issues. It's a public health crisis for humanity, caused by humans, affecting humans. And the third point is we seek to design vaccinations against this exploitation. So we are not trying to portray some of the things that are cruel and dominant as service systems. But we think that what's happening on planet Earth, it should be truly a service system. Many of our ideas echo an idea from the 70s. James Lovelock and Lynn Margulis created the concept of the Gaia hypothesis. Gaia was the Greek god of the Earth. So the Gaia hypothesis was that the Earth's systems have evolved, co-evolved, to create the opportunities for life. Ours is similar to that, but we're going past what they were thinking about, because they were just thinking about the natural biological. We're including the human in addition to that in terms of the system. But the humans are acting more like a virus or a parasite than the rest of the planet. Not that that was an end. So here's how we're going to break down this presentation. Alison's going to start with the first part, looking at things from the macro level of the system. Of course, in systems, we always talk about system level. So we're taking it from the top. The macro level is Alison's role. Qusay is going to look at the meso level of state-imposed vulnerability, which is where a lot of those cruelty and dominance problems are happening. And he'll talk about that, followed by me talking about at the micro level, refugee journeys and refugee concepts. Now, I need to emphasize at this point that these are all related to CERV-CoLab research. I started CERV-CoLab in 2018. We've now published more than 20 articles. These two have co-authored previous articles. We're in the middle of working on some of these things here as well. These are some of the major problems that CERV-CoLab was created to work on. Our name is a contraction of serving humanity through its collaboration. The serving humanity is the purpose for what we're trying to do. The collaboration is the process. Not a simple task, of course. But this is the big level of this is the overall view that we're trying to accomplish. So I need to give you some background on CERV-CoLab with this slide. CERV-CoLab evolved from research on transformative service research. And I was fortunate enough to participate in the early work on that. In 2011, Mark Rosenbaum led a co-authored team of 12 of us who wrote the first major documents, and there's another one that was published shortly later that Laurie Anderson did. In those articles, those two articles, improving well-being was the key concept for the outcome that transformative service researchers wanted. That was partially because transformative service research evolved from transformative consumer research, which was the key inspiration for transforming service research, for consumer groups. So that was the starting point of transforming service research. Shortly after that, I started working with, I started working with Linda Alkire on a project on refugees. And Linda and I, shortly after we started, realized, wait, improving well-being doesn't fit refugees very well versus, well, the real problem so often is a suffering problem. The refugees are suffering from some sort of difficulties. That's why they're a refugee. So we decided that we needed to add reducing suffering to the concept of transforming service research. When I was then working with Linda and others to form CERV-CoLab, we decided we had to put that in the mission for CERV-CoLab. But we recently added another level to the transforming service research outcomes, enabling well-becoming. The easiest way to describe what we mean by well-becoming is opportunity to become more than we are now. It's the easiest way to describe that. We added that to our mission in 2023. So our mission now is to serve humanity through research collaborations that catalyze reducing these three things: reducing suffering, improving well-being, and enabling well-becoming. And I've left that the newest one in green to emphasize. But we think that was a needed part of the process. Qusay, and one of the things he and I have written recently, we've described the three stages as reducing suffering is the lagging edge of human progress. The middle point of human progress is the well-being stage, where things are okay, but they could be better. And the enabling well-becoming is the leading edge of human progress. That's the way we like to think of it. So one more slide before it's Alison's turn. Here are two premises for you for what we're doing in this presentation. The first one comes from a great book that we have stumbled across it. It's a short, almost poetic book written by Robin Wall Kimmerer. The key phrase that she uses more than one time in her book is the all for a, all. That isn't even very quote. I don't get that. Qusay, I don't know how we did that to the slide. It's supposed to be all flourishing is mutual. We messed up that slide when we were working with it. It's supposed to be all flourishing is mutual. That is actually the quote. Our version of that in services is the life service like this, the service phrasing for that. That's interesting. So they must have accidentally been talking to the computer when we were doing this slide.
It's like AI.
Yeah. No, it wasn't AI. We accidentally did
Yes.
text.
We definitely made our slides ourselves and not with AI.
True.
Yes, thanks, Ray. So the first part of this was a project that Ray had started on his own, thinking about reimagining the human service system of Earth, and then more recently invited the two of us to join on it. So for the last few months, we've been thinking about Earth, the Earth service system. So this is a circular project, and circular service researchers are uniquely positioned to help accelerate human progress, given that service researchers can see all the activities on Earth as service systems. They are uniquely positioned here to help accelerate the process. But that's where we see the service systems, and that's why we are uniquely positioned. But seeing the service systems is not enough, which is where we come in with our reimagining Earth, the Earth service system. So Ray mentioned this picture before. This was the first picture of Earth taken in 1968. And before this picture, Earth was often referred to as Spaceship Earth, which is quite a good metaphor because we are all on this spaceship. All the resources that we need are in this spaceship that we all exist on. And prior to this picture, this picture brought about the overview effect, which helped shift human consciousness. So especially for environmentalists and astronauts to start thinking about Earth in the way that we want to. So the overview effect describes the transformative cognitive and emotional shifts reported by astronauts who view Earth from space. So that picture was very fundamental to shaping how we start to see Earth and the resources that we have there. So from this, we started thinking about the Earth service system concept, where, as Ray explained, life evolved to serve life on Earth, which we refer to as the Earth service system. So this encapsulates the essence of life's interconnectedness and the interdependent reciprocal relationships that sustain life on Earth. So there are lots of instances of these reciprocal relationships. For instance, our relationships with plants, where we breathe out carbon dioxide, breathe in oxygen. They help us with that process as well. So the Earth service system concept provides a unifying framework for understanding service at the planetary macro scale, which is what we aim to do. And it bridges ecological, social, and economic systems to promote flourishing of life on Earth, which is what our ultimate aim is, to promote, to enable that flourishing on Earth. So here's a visual representation of that with the three components: the ecological systems, social systems, and the economic systems, where the ecological systems evolve from early life, the social systems evolve from ecological systems, economic systems evolve from social systems with an evolution towards mutualism. But modern human systems are evolving too slowly, and we would like to help accelerate that process. So what we need to do is we need to start rethinking, or continue, I guess, rethinking human systems to accelerate this human system towards mutualism. And we've identified 3 systems in particular where collaboration is needed. So knowledge systems, like schools and universities need more collaborative knowledge systems. Government systems, local, national, state, and international, and economic systems, so customers, workers, corporations. We want to rethink these systems to get to a more collaborative arena. So this is built largely on something that Ray and I, with colleagues, have been working on for quite a while. So the 4 pillars of service inclusion, which we started back in 2017, was the first time we started talking about service inclusion, where I was a PhD candidate at the time, actually, and we were invited to a thought leadership conference in Brisbane, where I was doing my PhD at the time. And we were challenged to think about services and where we might be able to start rethinking what we knew there. And after a few days of deliberation around what we needed to focus on, what we needed to advance in service research, we decided service inclusion was a very important area. And we came up with the 4 pillars of service inclusion, which we then published in 2018. Then in 2019, we again had intentions to do a similar thought leadership conference, which didn't go ahead in person, given what happened in 2020. So we met online for this one, but followed a similar process where we had online deliberations, trying to think about what can we do to advance our service inclusion pillars. And at this point, in around 2021, we started thinking about upframing them. So these are the pillars from our 2023 paper, where we wanted to take more of a strengths-based approach. So the original ones had a little bit of the deficit language in there. So essentially they're the same, but revised to take more of a strengths-based approach. So what we thought was very important for service inclusion, how to enable service inclusion, was first enabling opportunities, empowering people by providing access. So first step, very important, empower people with access. Then enabling choices. So again, empowering them with viable choices, figuring their resources, opportunities, and skills. Stepping up to nurturing healing, so providing essential services that close gaps and fulfill their needs. And then fostering happiness. So this initially was reduced suffering, which we then upframed to fostering happiness, so to encourage people to experience the pleasure that services can provide. So not just the access or the choice, but then the healing and the happiness as well, where we then theorize that each one is a step up to service inclusion. Based on this, Ray and I have recently been working on more service inclusion stuff, and this is founded on our collective love for the cats that we have or do share our life with. So we started thinking about pets. We started with pets, and we started thinking more broadly about animals as well, with the relationships that we have, the way in which we share the planet with them. And we thought that what we need for our service inclusion thinking is to think about animals and the planet more broadly, and not just the humans in this. So this is very new. Ray and I have been working on this maybe actually for a year. I think this year's just flown by. So relatively new, but we started thinking about harmonizing relationships with pets, animals, and nature by again broadening the application of our 4 pillars of service inclusion. So what we seek to do here is include all life forms, not just humans, but pets. We start with pets given our very close emotional relationships with them and the roles that they play in our life, but animals and life forms more broadly. So starting still with enabling inclusive opportunities, where we empower people to include all life forms in service systems. Then we thought the next step would be enabling agency, granting all life forms a sense of agency and respecting the need for agency. So animals also have the right to a good life and that agency as well, even if they are a little bit limited in their capacity to act on their own agency. We have to make those decisions for them. Nurturing healing still, providing essential services that serve and protect the needs of living systems, and then fostering flourishing, which is where we want to encourage meaningful connections, mutual flourishing, and ultimately harmony on Earth. And that's where we thought harmonizing was a really good metaphor here. And we came up, this is our visual representation of this with our harmony with animals, and we intentionally put the harmonic notes by the bird to represent that harmonic relationship, and just has the 4 pillars that we have now broadened. So that's the more macro level that we've been working on. I will now hand over to Gordon.
Thank you very much. So now we will move to the meso level, and I will tell you the story of this article where I have been working on for a while, which explores a striking service failure on the meso level. This article was submitted for a special issue, JBR, Journal of Business Research, for a strength-based approach for customer vulnerability. We have one of the special issue editors, the tendency, Professor Sertan Kabadai. Well, in this article, we started thinking about vulnerability and how it starts from, or it gets initiated from human suffering. But the fact is that existing research assumes that these vulnerability experiences, they happen to people that are fully recognized as participants in the service system. We realize that this is not always the case. Because in the nation state that has the power to impose identity or identities on individuals that stigmatize or keep them invisible in the service system, that produces what we call state-imposed vulnerability experiences, which are permanent, structural, and extremely difficult to escape. We recognize 3 different participation categories in the service systems. The first in the green, it's for recognized participants, people who are recognized by the service system, they have access to services, and their strengths are usable. When those people fall under or suffer from vulnerability experiences, a strength-based approach which believes in enabling the power or the strengths of people with capabilities, it would work in that category. But for other categories, some situations stigmatize participation. People are partially recognized. It means they are recognized, they are allowed into the service system, but they are labeled. And their strengths are undermined and disrupted, restricted. Lots of people are like that. And the third category, it's the people who are not recognized at all in the service system. They have no legal recognition. They are excluded completely from the service system, and their strengths are rather invisible. We illustrate our conceptual design with a striking case of invisibility in the service system, which is about statelessness. We define those 2 types are usually caused, so the yellow and the red, are usually caused by an identity imposed by the nation states on these people. We define state-imposed vulnerability as an extreme strength repressing form of vulnerability that stigmatizes, harms, discriminates, marginalizes, and excludes individuals or groups because of the identities imposed and or stigmatized by the nation-state system. Statelessness, the case that we use to illustrate state-imposed vulnerability. In that paper, I want to give you a little background on statelessness, what it is, what is it. It's simply people who are not citizens or they don't have the nationality of any country in the world. The United Nations 1954 Convention, which is the only convention or United Nations activity that define what are the stateless people and how the service system should deal with them. It defines them as people, persons who are not considered national by any country. This is against the Human Rights Watch. Statelessness is against the Human Rights Declaration, which states that everyone has the right to nationality, and no one should be deprived from that. In 2025, UNHCR, which is the UN Agency for Refugees, reports 110 million refugees globally, out of whom 4.4 million stateless individuals. However, the numbers of the stateless people are they are significantly undermined because they don't, not all stateless people are included by UNHCR. There are some special agencies from the UN working with specific cases of statelessness. Those do not appear in the statistics of the UNHCR. Example of that was called UNRWA. We will talk about that in a few minutes. We estimated, during our research, we estimated the total number of stateless people to be around 7.5 million, covered by different UN agencies. The case that we are looking at in this paper is the case of experience of statelessness of Palestinians living in Lebanon. Those are around 500,000 people registered in Lebanon as refugees and been suffering from statelessness for over 75 years after their displacement from Palestine. Lebanon is not did not sign the 1954 convention, which means that the country does not have any obligation to care or protect these people with stateless people are living on its territory. The experiences of these people that are the state-imposed experiences of these people start from the early life. When they are born, there is no legal registration. They don't get registered as normal people. They are restricted from public schools as children, so they don't get the education that other people get. They are also excluded from university education or higher education, where then their strengths are not possible. It's not possible for their strengths to develop. And after that, there are also some special legalizations for them for the work. In the work market, they are forbidden. They were forbidden from 75 high-earning professions until 2010. Today, they are forbidden from 39 professions. That includes medicine, engineering, being an advocate or a teacher, or these type of professions. They are not allowed to do it. Across all of their life, they are not allowed to public health centers or hospitals. They are not allowed to housing, so they live in refugee camps for 75 years, not allowed to own property outside of these camps, and not allowed to fix or build more constructions in these camps. and of course we talked about the healthcare expert. There is a United Nations agency called UNRWA, which is trying to provide these essential services for this population and other stateless Palestinian stateless populations around the Middle East in general. However, this agency is struggling with finance, and recently there was very massive and severe cuts in the financing of this. They have been closing health centers on a daily basis and schools. So, in order to dislodge this type of state-imposed vulnerability, we got inspiration. We developed two principles: the wisdom levers and cranes. They are inspired by Norman's concept for reframing systems, which is relieving burdens and then enabling opportunities, and from Daniela Meadows, the leverage point for system change, and from Dennett's 1995 concept of crane making cranes. So we designed a conceptual model with wisdom levers, which are conceptual tools that are supposed to dislodge the identity that caused the state-imposed vulnerability, and wisdom cranes that are the conceptual tools that are supposed to construct what we call the birthright human identity that is right for all humans, and that is the strength that can enable other strength within the service system. For the levers and the cranes, before that, the levers and the cranes, both of them, we choose 3 levers and 3 cranes. All of them are TSR concepts, and at the same time, 4 of them are Self-Collab perspective articles. One of them is the article that initiated Self-Collab, and the last article is one that inspired, one of the articles that inspired launching Self-Collab, which is the first one, which is service inclusion. How do these cranes dislodge state-imposed vulnerability? So very, very basic, or simply service inclusion. It changes the fact that these people are not allowed into the service system because of their identity. And then when they are included in the system, service system, then they have to be included in a healthy service system that would allow their natural strengths to develop like any other human being. And then the wiser service system would protect the service system from any concepts or behaviors or language stigmatizing those people, so it prevents from recreating such experiences of state-imposed vulnerability. Of course, I mean, dislodging the problem with these concepts will not be enough, because we need to build what was never allowed to exist, which is the natural strength of birthright human identity. We built these also with 3 cranes, which are also TSR concepts, as we discussed before. We start from elevating human experience, which is supposed to change the logic and the purpose of the service system, and direct that towards elevating the human experience. Then the service thinking mindset, it would change the mindset that produced these such vulnerability experiences. And finally, the service standards for humanity will guarantee the protection of these people from future vulnerability experiences by guaranteeing that they are treated with agency, dignity, and diversity. We define birthright human identity as, which is the solution for that problem, the natural strength that enables other strengths, mutual responsibilities and opportunities for humans in the service system of planet Earth. This birthright human identity is supposed to be beyond citizenship documentations and classifications. It cannot be granted, so no service system will give it to anybody or taken away. And it will be the ground for participation of all humans in the service systems that guarantees their dignity and agency. In summary, the state-imposed vulnerability experiences was dislodged by the wisdom levels that we talked about, and then the cranes will construct the new human birthright, human identity, which will upframe the strength-based approach for vulnerability, that it will, after this, be possible for the strength-based approach to address vulnerability experiences for people who are either invisible or stigmatized in the services. With this said, we move to the third level, which is the macro level. Back to Ray, who's going to talk to us about.
Thank you, Qusay. So now we get to the micro level, but as you can see from what Qusay was presenting, it connects to the other levels of the system in obvious ways. So our title for this one is Service Systems for Humanity, and the subtitle there is Mapping the Refugee Journey from Suffering to Well-Becoming. I'll talk here about multiple things we've published on refugees that are so-called related. Starting with some details first, because when Sertan was there in the audience, Sertan Kabadai is one of the team members that I'll be talking about shortly here. We were first looking at refugees as one of the biggest problems on planet Earth. One of the descriptions that Qusay and I talked about recently is that there's an old idea in mining that they put a canary in a mine so the canary would get sick from the toxic gases in the coal mine before the miners would, and so the canary would save the humans. Refugees are sort of like the canary. They are a warning to the rest of us that there are big problems on planet Earth. And as I'm going to try to explain, they aren't going to get better if we don't do more. So the first point is that we are facing a serious crisis. A woman by the name of Gaia Vince, that name Gaia, that's her first name. Gaia Vince is her first name. She argues in a 2022 book that climate change alone will be the primary cause of massive human migration on the billions level in her argument in this century. Her title of her book is Nomad Century. She thinks it'll only get worse across much of the world because of climate change. People will have to move if it gets too hot. I can't believe that. I'm originally from out in Arizona. I was born in Yuma, Arizona, one of the hottest cities on the planet Earth. It's not getting any better out there. It's been dry from the beginning. It's not getting better. So humanity must start to quickly adapt to this massive human thing. And there's no evidence that we are getting there yet in terms of that adaptation at all. So the global refugee crisis is seriously disrupting the social and political fabric of nations and regions. And I don't need to persuade you of that. You've seen today's news and yesterday's news and the day before's news about the political problems around the world tied to unhappiness with these foreigners that are invading countries and all this other nonsense. These are people in need. They're not invaders. Our first research project was focused on refugees because of those issues. Back in 2021, when we published Suzuki Bonico at the team, Sertan and I were the co-leaders of it, but she was the instigator of the whole effort. And I'll talk a little more about that article momentarily, but I want to add some more details straight from the United Nations, their refugee agency, the UN Refugee Agency. Starting up here on the top left, the global trends at a glance. By May 2024, more than 120 million people forcibly displaced worldwide. Persecutions, conflicts, violence, human rights violations. All reasons why any normal human would want to flee. Those are not conditions for life. They're conditions that are dangerous and deadly in many cases. So they break it down further. You can see that it's 43 million refugees. 63 million of those are internally displaced. 63 million. Plus almost 7 million asylum seekers, and then the last one, 5.9 million people in need of international protection. The majority of them in the context of Venezuela. So that's just that summary at a glance. Here's some of the regions. Those are the top 10 regions for numbers of people that are refugees. They're concentrated primarily in Africa, parts of the Middle East, but there's also Myanmar there. Ukraine, of course, is there with problems there with Russia invaded. I should say Putin invaded. I think that might be more accurate. And then this last point here, 73% of all refugees and other people in need of international protection come from just 5 of those countries, from Afghanistan, Syria, Venezuela, Ukraine, Pennsylvania. So serious numbers of people. They are not on a tourist trip. They are desperate people. So this was, again, the first article. The title was Rethinking Service Systems and Public Policy and Transforming Refugee Service Experience Framework. I'll show you that framework in a moment. I'm not going to tell you about the abstract. This is just straight off a snapshot of our title. You can see there's a lot of names there. I mentioned Sertan and myself already. There are there's 10 other people, 13 in total. 10 people beyond the first 3 of us from around the world with different experiences from their own part of the world and all concerned with this issue. I was quite excited that this was our first research project. As I told Silke and Sertan, I really thought that Sir Kolib couldn't have chosen a better topic in the sense that we really want to serve humanity. Here's a huge group, around the billions and millions of people that are not properly being served. And they don't fit the typical business logic because they're not customers. They aren't paying their way in. They don't have all the permissions and processes of where's your credit card and all these other things that we talk about in marketing and business. They deserve help with. And that's what we're trying to get to. So here's the framework. We call it again the Transforming Refugee Service Experience Framework, and to break it down perhaps a little more effectively, I tried to label on the sides the parts. It took us a long time, the 13 of us, to create this framework. We struggled to try to put all the parts together. So the overall top level there is a refugee service experience from suffering to well-being, given that across the world, not every refugee is treated badly, but there's also the context of how many problems have they had before they arrive at a new location. So all kinds of aspects. And then that right below it is the level of the refugee service system. How does the system respond? Is the system hostile to the refugee, or is the system hospitable to the refugee? So we've got the human side and the system side in that top level. That's the first issue there. Then in the next set of ideas in this framework, we've got the journey. So we set up the journey across 3 stages: entry, transitions, and exit. So in other words, they're now in a refugee state. They've got to make the transition. Many of them crossing the Mediterranean, crossing hostile border situations, all kinds of crazy complications, and hoping to exit. And as Qusay is talking about, some people have a really difficult time exiting refugee status. So it's not like it's a 1-year excursion. It's frequently a lot less. But the last level, the systems level. And you can see one of the things I haven't tried to describe on the side, but you can see a sad face, happy face, and an arc at the top. In each of those sub-boxes, all 9 of those, we've got that image again. When we were writing the article, we proposed that one way that the people of Earth could track how well they are treating refugees would be to monitor the service levels for refugees across all 9 of those sectors across planet Earth. And we're actually hoping in CERT to get to that kind of level. We're not there yet. We're still working on other things, which I'm going to show you shortly. But that was our attempt to present an overview of the need from a service perspective. So, the next one that is directly tied to refugees that I need to talk about now, Qusay has already talked to you briefly about. This is one of the cranes. It was the last crane that he showed you, the service standards crane. So when I wrote this one with Mark Musowski, we decided that we needed to establish what we were arguing were service standards for all humans, but then apply them to a group of humans that have the greatest needs, to apply them to that group. So to do that, we came up with the 3 that he's already mentioned, which is diversity, that humans are all different. We should accept that and serve their needs because they're different. And not mistreat them because they're different, but accept that they're different and serve them better based on their differences. Then the dignity issue that all humans are entitled to dignity, deserve respect for their dignity, etc. And the third and top level of that crane that America and I built was the idea of enabling their agency, so that they are able to do what they want. And many of the things that Qusay talked about in terms of the Palestinians in Lebanon, in terms of their situation of being trapped, they were not able to do things. They did not have agency because of the problems caused by state-imposed vulnerability. So that one is more recent. And a very recent 2025 article, research on it, and I also collaborated on with Linda Alkire this week. This is in the European Journal of Marketing just this past year. Our title was From Theory to Practice, a Collaborative Approach to Impact Measurement and Communication. And I've summarized some of the key issues. That our purpose was to create a co-creating toolkit, to help a nonprofit organization that was working with refugees in the UK to help them be more effective and efficient in serving the refugee needs there. So we were in collaboration with them. It wasn't just us as outsiders trying to look at it without their input. And in the spirit of what CERT was trying to do with collaboration, we met with them, discussed what they needed, thought about how we could apply academic ideas to what they were doing, and proposed to develop, with their help, a practical toolkit for identifying and reporting social impacts for areas that are typically difficult for them to measure. And I should emphasize that nonprofits are often challenged to show impact of their work. And they're often working in areas that are not as easily quantified as typical business ideas. Often in the case of refugees, for example, you can't talk about how your sales were up because you processed more refugees. It's not typical business language. So we were trying to help them be able to create a toolkit to improve that. So to wrap up our presentation, I just wanted to finish with a few slides just to tell you really quickly other ways that CERT is doing things and how you can get involved. So we summarized that with this slide. That's our website. And on that, you can find out more about who we are, what we're doing, and how to get involved. We've covered a lot of what we do, but we haven't covered it all by any means. And there's a QR code if you want to do that. And we certainly encourage you to do it because we are a nonprofit. So I abandoned academia to do this. I retired from academia to be truthful about it. I'm still in that role as a distinguished professor, emeritus professor. But this was something that is now my passion project at the last stage of my life. Because I was convinced that it was a need that I might be able to help recruit other people to get involved in. So now it's question time. Any questions or interactions with you would be wonderful.